Welcome everyone to the Neurodiversity in Literature series. This video is entitled Look-Fors and Considerations for Neurodiversity Representations. I'm Kerry Cormier.
And I'm Madeline Boehning.
This presentation is presented through the Learning Resource Center Network, which is an NJDOE Office of Special Education project. The Learning Resource Center Network offers educators, leaders, and families support, services, and professional development. The slide here includes the information for all of the 4 LRC locations and their contact information. And today's video series is brought to you by the LRC-South, which is located in Rowan University's College of Education in James Hall. Our agenda for this video is first to look at the look-fors in neurodiversity representation, second, to talk about suggestions for text selection, and third, to discuss classroom considerations. The norms of the LRC-South is that we use strengths-based language and demonstrate a growth mindset. We engage in solution-oriented discussions with open minds. We reflect on what is shared and seek clarification or support when needed. And we stay focused on the topic, actively listening to one another and ensuring all voices are heard.
As a result of this video, we hope that educators will be able to identify aspects and features of strength-based representations and utilize a checklist for selecting texts. So we'll begin with the look-fors for neurodiversity representation. We have found that there tend to be 5 areas that are helpful to look for. First of all, the identity of the author of the work, the identity of the narrator, the character complexity throughout the book, the engaging level of the plot, and then themes, tropes, and language that are used throughout the work. We begin with author identity. It's important to look for a little bit about the background of the author or the creator of whatever work that you're going to be using. It is important to think about whether this author self-identifies as neurodivergent or that they have a close connection with neurodivergence, maybe through a family member or they've worked as a teacher with neurodivergent students. But to consider this, and when you're thinking about your neurodiversity representation in the text that you've selected, many authors will come out and identify as neurodivergent. And you can find this in many ways in the back of the book and the author information or on their website. Also they should show evidence of research related to the neurodivergent experience. Either they have personal lived experience, or again, like I've said, that they have that close connection to that. And to describe neurodivergent experiences in authentic ways. And that's really what we're going after. If the author identifies as neurodivergent themselves, we have found that the representation within the book tends to be more authentic. In terms of the narrator identity, it's important too to consider how the narrator identifies and consider some of the characteristics that are listed on the slide. Does the narrator or the main character self-identify as neurodivergent, as autistic? Does the character have ADHD, dyslexia, or another form of neurodivergence? And also, does the character experience a range of complex and dynamic human emotions like neurodivergent people in the real world? Does the character exhibit a multidimensional identity? Does the character neurodivergent and maybe identifies as LGBTQ plus, or maybe is representative of other races and gender and so on? Is the character in a similar age of the students, the intended students that you're going to be working with? Because we know that tends to be very important as well. In terms of character complexity, when you're looking at a text, look for characters with the following characteristics. Do they exhibit complex and dynamic range of human emotions? Do they have multidimensional identities, just like I was talking about with the narrator? Do these portrayals of different characters disrupt stereotypical representations of neurodivergence?
And I think it's also important with character complexity to think about major characters and minor characters. Who is, um, where are neurodivergent characters located within the text, right? Are they only the minor characters or are they the main characters who are kind of driving the plot and telling the story? And do we see a wide range of neurodivergent characters in the text? Is it the main character and their friends, and their family members? Those are some of the other ideas with characters that we want to consider and look for as well.
Absolutely.
And so then also looking at the engaging plot. And again, like who are the characters that are driving this plot? And so we want to make sure that the storyline is again engaging for all readers, especially the age level of students that we're working with. Um, we want to strive to have the characters' neurodivergence not necessarily be the sole focus of the plot. It certainly can be discussed as any other aspect of their identity should be discussed, but it isn't necessarily the main focus, right? We're not just focusing on, again, if the character is autistic or dyslexic, that's not the main focus. It's present because it's a natural part of who they are. But again, there's other factors going on that are driving the plot. And we also just want to, again, as teachers, be mindful of the elements of plot. Is it a hero's journey? Is it the typical plot diagram? And so those are the things that we want to think about when we are looking at the stories that we're selecting to use in our curriculum. And finally, looking at the themes, tropes, and language. And we touched upon this in some of the other videos in the series, but being mindful that the story overall presents a strengths-based theme and universal truth. Again, it may be focused on a neurodivergent character, but they are experiencing life and, life's emotions and conflicts and complexities in the same way that any other character would, whether or not they're neurodivergent. We also want to make sure that the text and the themes avoid common disability tropes. Like we don't want the disabled superhero, the story of overcoming, living life in spite of my neurodivergence. Like that's not what we're looking for. That's not something that we want to promote about life with neurodivergence for our students who might be neurodivergent in reading these texts. That's not something that's going to make them feel better about themselves. And with that, we also want to be mindful, does the text use strengths-based language, identity-first language, which is preferred by many neurodivergent people? And that's where, again, that authorship really comes in. And has the author done their research, or are they themselves a neurodivergent self-advocate who's promoting these ideas about strengths-based and identity-first language? So some suggested texts for various grade levels. So elementary, and again, these are all texts that are written by neurodivergent authors. Um, Elementary, we have 3 picture books here, A Day with No Words, written by Tiffany Hammond. We have The Brain Forest, and Benji, The Bad Day, and Me. We have middle grade books, A Kind of Spark, Moojog, and the Autocode Secret. And finally, The Fire, The Water, and Maudie McGinn. In young adult novels, we have On the Edge of Gone, Afrotistic, and Tilly in Technicolor. And again, they're all written by neurodivergent authors. They center neurodivergent characters. And certainly there is an element of the characters explaining their neurodivergence and how life is for them, but it's not necessarily the key focus of the plot.
They have great stories, and the
Yes.
kids and the students will love them.
And so just some classroom considerations as you might decide to incorporate some of these suggested texts or other texts that you find into your curriculum. Including neurodivergence and disability when discussing aspects of identity is crucial. It's often a part of identity that is left out of conversations when we talk about our lives and the lives of characters and the lives of students. So really bringing that into our conversations about identity. As we talk about who our characters are and who our students are. We also want to consider the complex dynamic and evolving student identities in the classroom from year to year, and being very mindful of our students who might be neurodivergent. And we don't want to tokenize them, right? Like if we select one of these texts to read, we don't want to necessarily highlight that student, and we want to be mindful about how they feel reading the text, but also monitoring how their classmates are interacting with them if they know that they're neurodivergent. They may not have disclosed that aspect of their identity, or if they have, we don't want them to feel like they have to speak for all neurodivergent people. And we also want to be mindful about our own experiences as educators with neurodiversity, and being open about that. Maybe we know a lot about it, maybe we need to learn more about it. And so those are really good conversations to promote. We also want to ask students what genres they prefer, and try to find books with diverse character representation that align with those genres. And again, inviting students to provide their own book recommendations, so that they have a say and a choice in what they're reading and learning about.
So we'll think about the key takeaways from this particular session. I want you to think about when selecting texts with neurodivergent representation, look for author identity, narrator identity, character complexity, the engaging plot, and strength-based themes and language. Also, be cautious about selecting a text simply because one character is labeled neurodivergent. There are many negative stereotypical portrayals that can do more harm than good. Instead, seek out complex, strength-based portrayals of neurodivergence. Look to neurodivergent book reviewers for their recommendations. So we want to thank you for joining us during this session, the third session in our series. Here are some links to the LRC, the Learning Resource Center Network, if you are interested. We have a brief list of our references of the books that we cited in this, if you would like to explore those. And please be sure to connect with the LRC-South through the various social media accounts that are listed here. And consider visiting the New Jersey Department of Education's website. The link is here as well. Thank you so much for joining us.